either you play the VC game and you have a scale, or you. But I think in pre-seed, I was talking yesterday to a couple of LPs. It's a numbers game, right? So you need to make 60, 70, 80 investments to be able to provide good results in early stage, right? So I think you need to have the ways to do it. Maybe again, it depends also where you operate and what is your philosophy, right? I think you just need to be aware about what are the ingredients for success in whatever you're doing in this space, right?
Hey guys, welcome to VNTR podcast, and today we're hosting Cristobal Alonso. Cristobal, welcome, and maybe you can share a little bit background about yourself, and then we will move to our discussion.
Well, yeah. Good morning, Yuri. Thanks for having me. I always try to say that I hold like four hats, so I have hold four hats, which is not very common. So I've been in management consulting for years. Then I moved into a CXO role in enterprise in telco. So I was in Czech Republic, I was in Baltic, etc. So I managed large teams. Then I'm being a serial entrepreneur, run as a CEO through startups up to Series A, and then an investor for 10 years. So in a way, kind of being able to see all the spectrums of roles, which is usually people just like one and not the others. I think I have liked it all of them, but obviously consider myself more a serial entrepreneur and serial investor. And the last 9 years, I was the CEO of Startup Wise Guys. I'm being part of making 450 investments in early stage. Time will say how successful, but at least very impactful, because at the end of the day, contributing to 450 dreams or visionaries teams is always an amazing opportunity. Most of them start in Eastern Europe, Baltics, Ukraine, Turkey, but then moving and kind of conquering also Italy, Spain. So in a variety of geographies, which is usually not that common, and that's also making it extremely exciting and interesting for my own life development to know so many cultures, so many founders, so many people.
Cool. And so you're originally from Spain, right? But you did a lot of activity in the Baltics. How did the move happen to the Baltics?
Funny enough, my father was an engineer, a civil engineer. So even within Spain, I live in 13 different cities. Then I played basketball professionally, so I moved to another 4 or 5 cities. I was in the US also. So by the time I started working, I have already probably been in 17 places, and a couple of them international. And I always kind of like the idea of moving around and internationally. So I think I was living in London when I was in consulting. I work in 15 different countries. So being all over. And I think the move to the Baltics happened in 2010 was after my first startup. 4 years, raised 2 million euros in Spain, which was unheard of at that time. Things didn't work out, and I said, "Well, I need a job, right? And I need a job fast." And I reached out to some of my former CEOs and colleagues. I have an offer for Qatar, Turkey, and Baltics. And somehow Baltics won. I think it was for Lithuania. I love basketball, so being in the land of basketball of Lithuania was encouraging. And actually, funny enough, what I did like at that one was I was to be in charge of 200 engineers, Lithuanian and Latvian engineers. I said that has to be an interesting cultural challenge, and I took it. So that's how I ended up first. So basically, becoming the CTO of a mobile operator in the Baltics. And then that's how very quickly, and it was amazing because it was kind of the starting of the startup scene in the Baltics, starting in Estonia, but quickly moving into the two countries. So I was very, very thankful to be placed on an amazing job, but also to be in the middle of the first boom of the ecosystem, which allowed me to then contribute to them in different ways.
Yeah, we were at the same time in the Baltics. In 2012, I hosted one of the largest tech conferences called Startup Monthly Vilnius. Maybe you heard or attended. And with Mindaugas, co-founder of TransferGo, he helped to establish that. And this is when I met the startup Highway guys. And at that time,
I was one of the founders of Startup Highway with Rokas, Thomas Tunas, actually before, which was started like 6 months before Startup Wise Guys. I was looking at starting something and helping something because I seen a startup bootcamp in Spain. And actually, me and Rokas paired up together. So it was actually that one. And TransferGo, great guys, helped him a lot. Actually, he's been at my house in Copenhagen several times. So yeah, the roots connect very quickly, right?
Yeah, exactly. The kind of first investor, Greg Kidd, came to TransferGo through us, through that connection. I brought Greg Kidd as a speaker at that conference, and that's how they connected. Great. And you're using a nickname El Patron. Is it a nickname or what does it mean?
It's a funny story. Some people in my team love it. Some people in my team, especially my former head of marketing, didn't like it. No, but the funny part is the kind of the wise guys that comes from the Goodfellas movie. It was all around mafia. It was all around Italian American. So initially they put nicknames to themselves, Hertie and Company of Italians, right? So when I came on board, kind of people say, oh, you cannot be, an Italian thing. You has to be something different, like Narcos, like and then so we started with the joke. Second thing that happened is, we used to celebrate things with tequila, and there is the El Patron brand there, and every time I will give my email, Cristobal at startupwiseguy's.com, people will put an H, put a D, they always spell it wrong, right? So we started saying El Patron, and everybody spell it right. I guess everybody drink enough tequila in life. So kind of started being. So I think if you don't take it too seriously, I think it's a fun part, and I kind of stick, especially among the portfolio. And many people come, hey, Patron, how are you, etc. So again, if you don't take it too seriously, I think it's a fun part. Now that I'm back to Spain, people knows how to spell my name normally. I kind of try to use more Cristobal or Cristobal, but original one.
That's cool. Yeah. So you moved to Baltics and you started your startup journey, kind of helping startups. What didn't work with Startup Highway that worked with Startup Wise Guys?
Yeah, well, each one has its own. I think the one thing is that the initial SPV investment instrument was very similar in both places. I think the difference is that the one in Lithuania, in a way, the guys wanted to be very much into the decision making also. And again, you need to let the people running the investment side run their own cycle, right? Which did happen in sort of Wise Guys. I think also there was a way more international mindset in a startup Wise Guys. So even if there was international teams in Highway, I think it was very Lithuanian. There's nothing wrong about it. It's just different aspects, right? And I think the teams were different, right? And I think Startup Wise Guys was able to go through different MDs and thrive, while I think Highway was very linked to Roca's running it, right? And the connections he has made it. But I think, it has its impact. Funny enough, I'm still on the board of one of the Startup Highway first batch companies, SoFi. So it's now 12 years. So still up. So Maris Dagis, I'm actually became the CEO of a company that was in the third batch, Mobile Free in Africa. So, there was a lot of still links there. But that's why I came to Wise Guys, was the ambition grow. I was very clear that only maybe a handful of accelerators will have global access to pipeline, the top founders. The rest will be very, very much local and very much earlier. And I think that was the ambition I came in. But can we make Startup Wise Guys one of those top 5 brands in this acceleration early stage that becomes brand that people want in the cap table, and then with everything else, right? And I think that worked. And we start then expanding also our, funding, ambitions, etc. Right? So I think it was the brand focus at the end of the day and the brand vision that pay out in this case.
Yeah, and also cool logo helps as well.
Yeah, well, the rebranding story, which we undertook in 2022, was a piece of work on their own, and it took almost a year and a lot of emotional fights. Ended up being extremely well executed. But I think, I think brand was at the core. Ownership of that brand with the colors, all of us wearing red, and then, evolving the brand and try and make a decision at some point to. We actually, funny enough, we tried 3 times to rebrand. And only in the third one, we got it right. And again, we still with a lot of pain. But I think it was such a core proposition of who we were and who we are that it took always a lot of work to make it right.
When you joined Startup Wise, guys, it was a very early stage in a way, right? Kind of 10 years ago. What was then when you joined, and why did they bring you on board?
Yeah, I think it was batch 5. The first 5 batches, batch 6 actually, had been running in Estonia. I think the year before, Rivo, Anton, and with some help of Civita, did an analysis about what will it take to be successful. And there was this idea that it needs to go way more international, way more larger, let's say. And that's how basically, and when Hertie was asking around, Rivo, Andris Bersins, which is now Change Ventures, Callum Cameron, who was then, they said, who do you guys think that can be the person? They all pointed out towards me, right? I think because I had been in different roles. And that's how we started the discussion. Basically, Hertie and Rivo asked me to, hey, what will be your vision? We did this 2020, 200 investment, 20 batches, which seemed very large at that time as an ambition, which actually we surpassed it. We almost got there in 2019. But I think there was this idea about creating something big and something very impactful, and then basically reformulating the company to be 50-50 at that time between Hertie and me, adding Dak at that time. So I think it was the ambition to come in, growing a global brand out of a small regional player that was really exciting to come on board. And I think I was probably one of the people that was right to take it on.
These years, 2010 to 2014, there were so many accelerators popping around the world, right? And most of them stopped operating. Myself, I run Startup Monthly Accelerator in San Francisco, 2011 to 2013 as well. And I found it as a hard model to scale, right? It's a lot of lottery tickets that come your way. In a way, you support ideas and early stage teams, most of them inexperienced, right? What did you do right that created a viable business model for the accelerator?
I think the business model is hard no matter what, right? I think it can only actually pay out if you're able to fundraise in parallel sizable funds and also funds with follow-on capability, right? Because I think part of the problem that most accelerators have was they were able to do the first ticket, but not to follow on afterwards. I think the second part is the evolution. So I agree with you that have to remember that most of the accelerators pre-COVID were 14, 20 weeks on site. So it was very much targeted to first-time founders, people under 30, because people above that with families, won't be able to move 20 weeks to live in Tallinn or in Riga or in Vilnius. I think post-COVID or during COVID, it evolved because suddenly you only it was hybrid. Most cases, you spend only 3 to 4 weeks on site. And suddenly the age range and the internationalization became much bigger. And suddenly the type of founders we were able to attract were actually completely different. Actually, I think we attracted a lot of second-time founders, maybe first-time teams, but second-time founders. So, and I think just mixing that experience with more inexperienced founders pay out very well. I think the verticalization was important. So to be able to work in specific verticals in different batches and tie that up with connected network VCs that were working on those places.
What type of verticals did you guys use?
Yeah, so we started with B2B SaaS. Then we launched FinTech in 2017. We launched cybersecurity in 2018. Then we launched sustainability, which is focused on food tech, agri-tech during COVID. We tested virtual reality, which actually we have a couple of very good examples. Actually, our most valuable company in the portfolio is still counts for virtual reality, by invested in 2015. Then, we expanded cybersecurity to also cover defense way before it became a norm these days. And we also tried Web3 to understand the space. So I think being able to have those verticalizations attracted, for example, we were doing VR, we're actually getting a good number of Canadian and US companies because we're the only ones focusing on that area. And actually, those companies are doing well. So I think that verticalization also helped a lot. And I think it was also come to the people. I think we have been able to, through the entire life of the company, to attract great people, great managing directors, great scouting team, we have an incredible legal team, product. So I think we worked a lot on creating a great company, not just a great investor. And I think that was felt and that was very attractive to also startups to work with us, right? And I think then you create a network effect. The more startups you have, the more founders can support each other, and then has become basically a brand that people want to have in the cup. Of course, the evolution was from, you remember, it used to be 20,000 euros investment and owning 8% or 10%, depending on the accelerator back in 2012, 13. So we're in a very different ball game. And I think even today, investing 100K, I don't think that is even sufficient, right? So I think tickets have to go to 150 to 100K and even being able to syndicate. So basically, accelerators have become a pre-seed player, the good ones. The way the programs have evolved, it needs to be customized. And I think people doesn't even like the word accelerator, but I think you need to be able to have organized support programs to provide value added to founders. Right?
Yeah, and you build amazing community, right? As you grow, you have more founders joining, employees. It builds a strong community, and this is where the power comes in, right? Kind of, if you're a small accelerator, not enough companies, you're losing that power, right? And also, the more years you are in business, the network of co-investors grows.
I think it's a scale business, right? And at the end of the day, of course, over time you can be your own brand. But I think either you play the VC game and you have a scale, or you. But I think in pre-seed, I was talking yesterday to a couple of LPs. It's a numbers game, right? So you need to make 60, 70, 80 investments to be able to provide good results in early stage, right? So I think you need to have the ways to do it. Maybe again, it depends also where you operate and what is your philosophy, right? I think you just need to be aware about what are the ingredients for success in whatever you're doing in this space, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what did you gain personally by being the head of Startup Boys, guys? How did you grow?
Well, I think scaling the company and the brand has been an enormous privilege. It became very difficult since COVID for different reasons, and then the war started. So it's not been an easy journey for us. Also, the last 3 years, fundraising is tough, which means it's also tough for our founders. But I think, I completed 9 years until, for my tenure. And I think it's been an incredible journey for me personally. I think getting to know close to 500 startups, 1,000 almost founders, working very closely with them is an impact that you take for life, right? And I think that is already something extremely meaningful. Hopefully, also, within the next 3 to 5 years, that also impacts a bit our wallet for the kids to go to university and do some traveling where you can work a bit less. And hopefully, also, I think as I enter a new chapter, is the credibility to raise new funds and keep investing. I think I'm also grateful I was able to penetrate the last 2-3 years the cyber defense space and understand it a bit better, because it's been a fascinating journey, almost kind of seeing ahead of time that this is one of the key areas in which the world will be evolving, right? And keeping up my curiosity. We're in a new world. As I keep saying, with AI and everything happening around it, I'm still between, are we in the next industrial revolution, or are we in the next internet revolution, right? So internet was very big. The industrial revolution was basically the world changed it completely, right? People tend to think that we're in the next industrial revolution. We'll see, right? Because I think the society needs to change. But the technology is at the level of an industrial revolution. I don't know how society is going to enter into that, right? And I think also with geopolitics. So, but I think it's allowed me to be fit at my age to be ready for the next decade of changes and hopefully being contributing with a new breed of founders and startups. And I think we're in front of an era of companies that could be able to scale, being much smaller, more agile. It's still questionable can with this pace of change how companies will manage to keep growing and keep being at the leadership level, or will we see every 3 years a recycle of winners? Which, if that's the case, it makes very difficult the case for venture capital, right? So I'm also very curious how venture capital, early private equity will actually evolve, as we are in front of a completely new world, right? Exciting, but scary. More scary from the societal point of view about what happens. When I see the street, I see one thing. When I look at you talk to founders and to the super gurus and the AI guys, you see something completely different, right? So in one day, you're like, oh, you cannot miss one day or the world will change technologically. You look at the street, nothing is changing.
Depends which street you're looking at, right? It's kind of street in San Francisco is very different from street in Malaga or Portugal. You know, the innovation on the street will come later a little bit. Yeah,
I agree. But again, it needs to change, right? I don't think it might come a bit later. But again, when something is happening so fast, how is that moving back and forth, right? And it's not San Francisco. I'm sorry, we go to China today because that's what they see. But I think technologically, China is actually even more advanced, in my opinion, than many things we see in the US in terms of AI. Sorry, and cars, vision, AI, etc. Right? So how is that evolving, right? And how that will impact on the world changing. So that's very, very interesting in that sense, right?
exactly. So you invested in almost 500 startups together with your team. What did you learn in terms of choosing the right teams to join the accelerator? Like, what are the traits that you are looking for when they join, and which ones you wouldn't accept?
This is very interesting because I think there was a big shift when we moved from, as I told you before, from on site to online. Part of the shift was also that before we used to bring the final candidates together for 2-3 days and make an event with them in which we also added some social elements. Again, it was nicer to get to dig into the individuals, right? Into the team dynamics. There was a bit more of observation capability there. When we move online, I think that disappeared, unless you have enormous doubts and you do make 2 to 3 meetings, right? One of the things that I learned is that also, like, you need team decisions. So I think there is a reason why most funds have one, two, three, four, not one, two or more GPs, is because, you need this divergence of opinions, right? Because people see different things, right? I always say that as humans, we're very biased. When you like a team, you like a team, right? And you're just making observations to like the team more. When you don't like it, you're making observations why to like it less, right? So I think having in the room different opinions becomes very important. Things I don't like in early stage, teams talking about exit too early. I think that's a bad sign. So we just make a decision recently on a team that was really strong, but even in good traction. But the founders, especially the main founder, was talking about making an exit in 18 months, right? And to me, it's like you don't build value that way. Maybe you're very lucky, but you don't build value that way. So I think one of the most difficult things for us is always, will these guys carry forward 5-6 years plus, right? Or first offer to exit, they will run away, right? Because we have seen it in 3 or 4 cases in which they became 4 to 5x exits, and they could have been much bigger, but the founders just basically walk away, right? That is difficult to observe, but that's one of the key things we try to dig in, right? Looking at complementary aspects on the founders, being able to just not talk to the CEO, see anybody else in the team is also very relevant. Seeing the diversity of opinions there, the diversity of age, gender, culture, background, I think is important. But in B2B, so certain level of industry is very relevant, especially you after the enterprise market. I think that's actually you need to understand. And I think coachability, right? And not only because they're going to be working with us in some type of program, but because you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think the market is going to give you so many feedback points that if you are not this coachable thing, person, you're just not going to be able to hear it, right? So to me, it's how do we get into this coachability aspect, and then finally, is are the guys driven by the right thing, right? So when the hard truth of things will hit them, will they continue or will they just walk away, right? And I think in Eastern Europe, my view has always been that the level of resilience is higher. So I think people keeps walking despite 2 or 3 slaps, let's put it this way. In Western Europe, I think less clear. So I think we also spend some more time digging into that side, I would say.
And from the top performing startups that you guys invested, are there any certain criterias or I don't know founder traits that you identified that made them successful versus others?
And I think the ability to form teams, so not just CEO superstars. I think most of the teams that are performing very well, at least there is two if not three co-founders that are very strong. I think the ability to pivot is overused, but to kind of make shifts in the business model as it came. Almost all of them went through a rough patch in which, after a rapid period of growth, things stopped growing that fast, and they were able to be patient enough to dig in, look at the data, cut things, and go back. So I think that's also very relevant, and obviously the level of ambition, right? So the ambition to be always thinking big and global, or at least large regional, let's put it this way, global, is overused probably, but I think that's also very, very relevant, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that you guys were focusing on is to expand to new markets, right? Like going to Africa, expanding to other regions like Turkey. How did you guys help companies with go to market?
Yeah, well, I think the Turkish example is not that different from how we enter Ukraine, etc. It's about how do you have access to the right founders, right? So I remember actually when I lived twice in Turkey before we went there, and I always say, hey, there has to be a lot of talent here, but every time we go to a conference, we don't really see anything, right? And I remember meeting the Revo Capital team, and they just told us in Warsaw, you're just meeting the wrong people. Let us host you once in Turkey and introduce to the right people. And then I think we started getting into the right channels, right? Having a person working on the ground or having access to most of the people on the ground was also very relevant, right? But then we needed to understand the market, right? So the Turkish founders came with a couple of traits that were very, very, very clear, and we needed to counterbalance those, right? So part of the counterbalance was them ended up being the market, because initially they were very focused on the Turkish market because it was large enough. But again, they will focus on the enterprise. The enterprises will demand all their attention, and they couldn't go international. Then, because of the inflation, they realized that they will grow 3 times in sales, but they will still be almost flat because of the inflation, and that actually drove them out into having a more of an international vision, right? Africa was interesting because I worked in an African startup in 2014-15. So I think we were clear about the market, and we were clear that the market was very different. I think the problem with Africa is our fund was too small. And I think if you want to succeed in Africa, you need to be able to do at least 2 full rounds yourself. We kind of enter thinking, okay, we go small, we create some credibility because a new market, because we are not locals, and then we'll be able to raise higher. And it became very difficult without that kind of first breakthrough role model that people will give us. So I will say that, we did a good job supporting startups, and I think we have still some good cases that will evolve and will give success to our investors. But I wouldn't call it a success, right? I think Italy, now Spain, were better cases. I think Italy success have an Italian guy who actually was not living in Italy, but came to Italy with this opportunity, but really penetrating to get to access to funders that were not obvious. So I think this focus on local scouting, but with the right mentality. The fact that we said we're going to do the program in English. So really just targeted the right founders that really found value on thinking differently, not in Italian. The same thing happened to the Spanish parts, because these very large countries, they love to speak their own language, right? And but it makes it very difficult to scale. So I think it's a filter. It's a filter on its own, right? So I think you need to have the right expertise there. And in the Italian case, we have dozen at least companies performing really well, and I think that was kind of an amazing job by Andrea. The support we have, the growing the brand there. Also, we adapted a bit the brand positioning in the market, because you couldn't go with the mafia kind of a story, for obvious reasons, for example. So I think adapting that one, but also not committing certain aspects of how we did it, right? But I think we very much focus. I think is the EU focus. I think another thing that changed that, hey, they want to go to the US afterwards is great, but you need to also understand where do you provide value and when do you provide value.
Yeah. And if you look at Africa, which countries you would recommend startups to go first to?
Well, we were focusing mostly in Kenya and Nigeria, for obvious reasons in terms of size, also in terms of giving the opportunity to become regional players. But if you go to Nigeria, it's very difficult to go any other place, because Nigeria is so big and it's so messy that becoming successful in Nigeria requires full focus, right? We have a paid queen that is actually growing nicely and has done it through a combination of Ivory Coast, Ghana, Cameroon. So, and one thing that is clear is, if you're in one country in Africa, you're so exposed to the macro of the country, and if you get the bronze cycle, it's going to take 3 to 4 or 5 years, right? Because of the inflation levels. I think this is something that you need to very much consider, right? Can you find a way to de-risk the macro conditions? And that usually takes to be in 2, 3, or 4 countries, right? Which is not easy, because you are very limited in funding. There's different regulations. You need to have people that you trust in each of the countries. So it's a complex. It's not an easy. It's not an easy way, but at all.
Did you run your accelerator in Africa?
Yes, but we did it online. Why we launched at Africa was because when we say, before, with an on-site mentality, is that if you go to Nigeria, you can only go to Nigeria. You go to Kenya, you can only go to East Africa. But with COVID today, maybe now there is an opportunity to run a multi-country or regional base, but online, right? Which I think was well executed. However, again, I think it needed on-site parallels, the partners traveling there, spending time, which actually Petra and Francisca did. But again, then it needs different economics, right? So I think we just unfortunately we're too small. We played too small to be successful, not because of the lack of ambition. This is because we didn't manage to fundraise or to have a better model to work there, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned the challenges of raising capital in the past few years. So let's dive into founders fundraising, right? It's kind of you mentioned that you guys also syndicated funds. So how you as an accelerator you help to raise more successfully? Yeah.
Well, I always said to founders, traction beats everything, right? So if you have traction, you're going to be able to fundraise at some point. Second one is, can you actually find a model that you can break even at a decent level at some point? So in case the market is still not favorable, you maybe grow a bit less, but you can stay afloat with a huge level of pressure, right? And that's, can you reach that on a 40, 50, 60K MRR, right? Which is a decent amount of MRR, but it keeps you afloat, right? I think it's the ongoing capability to be talking to, what we have seen is a lot of people raising, you raise, but then an angel comes in and offers you a 50K bridge round a bit higher. So it's also being a bit tactical, because you don't know when you're going to be able to fundraise again. So saying, if the conditions are right, not saying not to money. One of the big changes we did was, I would say before 2022, especially funny during the 2 COVID years, companies will raise 100K from us, will run the program, get some good traction, and 6 months later, they have already raised another 250, 350, right? Suddenly that was gone, right? It will take 12, 18 months, 24 months, even with traction, to raise. So one of the big changes we did was trying to syndicate. So our 100K the guy say, oh, we're talking to this other VC, or we're talking to these angel investors. So we're trying to add a little bit as a lead investor and bring together maybe 200, 250, also sometimes through our connections. But I think we were acting mostly about adding that credibility, that first investor that the startup needed to bring everybody else, right? And I think that been an important role we have been taking. But as I said, I think whatever you're doing right now in early stage, I think ideally, you need to be able to syndicate from 250 to up to 500, which means you need to come yourself with a ticket of 150, 200 to be able to take that, right? So, I think hopefully is working with networks like yours, right? To be able to bring more investors, more global minded, etc., to the table. Because I don't think it's going to get much easier still in the next 12 to 24 months, right? And the good thing is that with the technology coming on board right now with AI, right? You don't need a team of 10 developers to scale products. I think a good CTO with a couple of developers and leverage AI on a constant basis can develop even to target enterprise products. I was talking to a founder the other day, told me, hey, I had to do an integration with, in this case, was Unity. You said it will take me 30 days to do this in the past. And I did it in one day myself. With the help of AI, I managed to do the integration with a completely new language code, right? So things have changed. I think you can be way more effective on using capital. But at the same time, he told me, but at the end of the day, this means that a product matters is sales. So we're back to the old paradigm, right? It's all about sales, right? It's all about, and there is so many options right now out there that sales is going to become more difficult. LinkedIn is overused, is being almost destroyed in many ways. You're so tired to getting these 200. So I think sales focus and sales is going to be interesting. But SEO is not anymore because now everybody's looking at ChatGPT or in different AIs, in Gemini, etc. So how do you do sales in this new world? And how do you do customer success and keep the customers, right? I think that's going to be very interesting.
So you mentioned you guys raised multiple funds. Initially, it was small portfolio, right? It's kind of it wasn't. It was hard to show that you are doing a good job as an investor. So how did you guys raise, and what do you recommend to emerging GPs today? How to raise capital from LPs?
A lot of dedication, a lot of resilience, a lot of conviction, being very clear why are you different and how can you be a winner, and being very clear in your investment thesis and what that investment thesis makes sense. It's very hard. I'm there right now raising two different funds. And I think the funny part, in Southern Europe, our enemy, let's call it this way, is real estate. So it's basically two aspects: is liquidity and is basically the length of investment, right? So you need minimum 5-7 years at least to show good returns, and it's a very liquid, basically, asset, right? And the last 2 years, the stock markets were doing well, so there was high interest rates in some of the products, so there was a lot of competition, and obviously because the market has not done well, suddenly a lot of people that invested in the vintages of 20, 21, 22, their funds are not performing that well, right? So it's a difficult time. I think you just need to be out there. You need to be convincing. You need to have time. It's difficult because you don't get paid. To me, fundraising is okay, it's fun, but the fun part is to be investing and be working with founders. And you only get that after you fundraise, and also that's the only time you get paid, right?
So a lot of founders don't appreciate the whole work that was done by the GPs to raise the funds and then to invest in them, right? It's kind of, they don't realize that you're also an entrepreneur struggling to build the fund.
Totally. But I'm not saying that we need to seek appreciation. It is what it is. But of course you say, guys, I always tell to founders, I have a worse journey than you because you at least have something tangible to sell. I have an intangible things, which is I'm going to invest in people that I still don't know, that are going to do great 7 to 10 years from now, right? Please believe me, right? And that is not an easy sell, right? So I think, and when it gets tough to founders, it gets tough to us, right? To fundraise, right? I think specifically in Europe, we need to do a good job bringing returns. Obviously, if we don't bring good returns, then the money won't come. But it takes time, right? But I think this is the only way to innovate and keep innovation in the continent, right? If not, what are we going to do, right? So real estate is an enemy. The market uncertainty doesn't help, but at least we need to also change the narrative of, I think Europe can do it. There can be incredible returns here, but we need to be basically we need to be very diligent and doing our job, right? And help and support each other on this journey, right? Because at the end of the day, we are creating ecosystems together, right?
Yeah. So you went on a new journey of forming your own funds, right? You parted ways with Startup Wise. So what is the why and what is your vision for your new funds?
Vision doesn't change. It's basically early stage. One of them is very focused in cybersecurity and data-driven industries with a focus in Spain, bringing founders to Spain, international founders in Spain. The other one is something we've been done a lot, which is defense, robotics, but then also in the future being able to combine different maybe SMB based funds, so more in the early stage private equity. I think I was talking to in the past when Oliver Holle for Speed Invest. I think if you really want to create an ecosystem of support to founders at different levels, you need to have a family of funds and you need to have enough size to do it. And that probably takes a decade to do all together. And then, we need to bring a new generation of general partners under us. So, we grow and groom the next generation. And then, we keep adding our value added, but they also come on board, right? So I think part of the idea here is, can we take some talented mid-30s people, bring them with us in this journey? So, in 1 or 2 more funds forward, they can be the ones actually doing a lot of the hard work, and we can just focus on the connections, on things that we do well, right? So we need new energy, we need combine. Again, in such a technologically advanced world, I think we need people who is also up to speed in these areas, right? So, but it's the same journey. It's about impact, and one of my focus right now is impact in Spain. Is about it's a large country, it's full of talent. We have an incredible amount of international talent joining, coming, wanted to live here because of different reasons. I think that's how we're going to move the country forward with this combination of local and international talent together, and also industries like cyber, like defense, like dual usage, that I think will also bring a new wave of innovation. And I think then the future will say, I think there is being open-minded into how to do this, and in the meantime, still making sure that the portfolio that I invested 450 founders in the past also gets supported. So the job is not only doesn't matter if you're not the CEO anymore. We still have to support founders, and they still need support, and they will need it if we want them to become successful, right?
Do you plan to invest in that portfolio as follow-on from these funds or not?
Not really, but I think we want to do early stage, right? So I think we want to do pre-seed, right? So that's the focus, right? I think, and we do that because I think that is where I have and we have the expertise. One, secondly, because I think it's a good vintage, meaning the market is being 3 years on the ground, right? Maybe it takes 1 year, maybe it takes 2 years, but it's going to go up, right? So if you are investing in pre-seed, that means that your Series A is in 4 to 5 years from now. That's your exit path, and I think that means that it's going to be there, right? So I think this is the vintages 25, 26 should be very good vintages if we take the cycle, as long as you can fundraise. Of course, the key thing is that can you sufficiently fundraise to bring this one? But I think this could be excellent vintages going forward. But also we need to see how do we evolve as an industry, right? So I think there is going to be changes. There's already changes. We need to leverage the technology. We need to leverage, and we need to understand how do we keep supporting in an organized manner. I still think that early stage pre-seed funds need to have some kind of organized support for founders because there is too much need. There is a lot of them. You're going to have a lot of them because you need 50 to 60 companies' portfolios. And I think you need to still be able to bring value and more than just getting a call and how can I help you, right?
Yeah. And how big is your new team?
We basically right now we're just focusing on the GP side on the funds. I think once we have obviously a big network of supporters and people, but I think not there yet. Let's put it this way, not there yet. But right now it's focusing on the GP teams raising the funds. And trying to see if we can do some closings during this summer, being operating in Q3. And that's already a tough call, right? So we need to focus the energy to do it.
Yeah, lots of work ahead. Let's touch on your lifestyle, right? So you mentioned you traveled a lot and you wear 4 different hats. So how do you balance your life with all these activities?
It's a good question. I think we go through different periods in life, right? And I think there is never an absolute answer about are you balanced or where you balance. I think you always look at the past with today's eyes and it's very different, right? I have kids right now in the early teenager years, right? So when I started the year, I make a very clear commitment. I wanted to travel less because I wanted to be more with them. Because I think these are the formation. You have the very early years that the values, the years, right? And that's when they want to do homework with you. That's when they get very emotional, very moody, and you need to be there, and they need to feel your presence. Sometimes, I was doing this. If you go to YouTube, you have this the flying CEO, right? And how to be mega effective when you travel, which I think I was. Also demanded a very large amount of energy. So when I started the year, apart from seeing the kids, hey, is there a way to be as effective without traveling or traveling in a different manner, right? And that's the focus right now, right? And I think I'm in that change process. I have already seen a lot of things that are optimized when you travel less in terms of thinking time, in terms of quality of calls. I think before there was a lot of calls on the move, running, etc. I think right now is how do you offer more quality versus more quantity. But it's still, again, I think once we fundraise, you still have then the hunt for founders, right? And we need to see where can you be. You have to be in places, right? But for example, I'm trying to travel a lot right now and be back at night or be back before the kids come from school next day, right? So, and that was Malaga is good. It's a very good airport, very well connected, direct flights almost everywhere. Of course, if I'm going to Baku or to Dubai, you're not going to be back next day, right? But again, almost, even going to Helsinki, to Copenhagen, even to Istanbul, you can do it on day and a half, right? But it's about how do you preserve energy. Of course, let's not kid ourselves. You are in early 50s, and your energy is different. And I think you need to understand your limitations, but also that's why I said, hey, we need to get the new breed under us. Maybe in some cases, less spotlight for us, more for them, and then you kind of do what you do well, right? But I think it's maybe 3 years from now, the kids they don't want to see you, and you do travel on a different way, or maybe you do you enjoy it, right? So I think it's just about listening to yourself and not bullshitting yourself on what are your priorities at any given time, and how do you offer the most quantity to the things that matter to you, be work, be at home, etc. Yeah, and valuing what you have.
What do you do for yourself? Sounds like all the things you mentioned, it's for the family and business. What rituals do you follow? Like what time do you wake up? How your day looks like in terms of sports and other activities?
Well, I think family is for myself also. I think it gives me, I think, for example, taking the kids, I almost take the kids always to school in the morning or to the school bus, which means waking up at 6:30, 6:45, preparing their lunch. So I think, for example, you get up, apart from the alarm, you don't even look at your phone. Your focus right now is that one routine in which you actually grounds you, right? Prepare the food for them, you wake them up. So almost until I put them in the bus, unless I have something very urgent that I'm waiting for, and don't look at my phone for an hour and a half. That means at 7:45, if I can already take a walk in the beach again, just to clear my thoughts or have a first call if needed, going somewhere, right? So I think that's a very important part. Another one is I try to have, if I'm at home specifically, to have a proper lunch. So to cook it and to have it probably takes 45 minutes, but I think again you slow down a little bit and you
So it forces you to take a break. Yeah, it's nice.
take a break and then make sure that at the end of the day, if you're at home, you throw some sports there if possible. I think every second day at least doing some sports. We're talking before, playing paddle, playing basketball. So I'm trying to throw sports at least 3 times a week on an organized manner. If not, doing some stretching, some exercise. And then again, if I'm cooking dinner, try to do it not too late. Try to put at some point you stop and you actually focus on even grocery shopping. Again, it's those things that allow you to decompress, take a break, to allow your head is again sometimes you say, hey, tough day, let's go for a walk in the beach, right? And you make it a habit to just walk, just talk, just breathe. Again, I think one of the big advantages of living in Malaga or you live in Lisbon, in places where we have good weather most of the year, is like take advantage of it, right? There's a lot of amazing things when traveling. I think obviously the cooking is different, but I think it's also trying to have your moments for you. You can do some sports. You can, for example, I try when I go, even in Dubai, I remember I try to do an hour walking, right? Of course, that means you have to do very early in the morning or at night, maybe after dinner, instead of taking a taxi, you just walk back, even if it takes an hour, etc. Just to give an example, being in Dubai, but it's how do you place these things basically in your life, right? Now I started with my gratitude writing. So every morning, 5 things your gratitude from the previous day. Actually, I started all about this year about, gratitude. I think is when you go under tough times, you need to understand that there's a lot of things that you have to be thankful for, right? Even if you not focus on the negative, which is obviously impacting you, but hey, there's a lot of amazing things in our life. Giving some focus to those will actually allow you to go through tough times in an easier manner, or at least looking at the holistic picture, right?
Did you have any framework for the founders in Startup Wise to support their mental health?
No, but it's a point that we touch a lot, right? So when I wrote the first book about Perform with Stoyan, my co-author, we have even a chapter about positive positive energy, right? So during the first week that we do on the accelerator on site, Stoyan will always come in, and this will be part of the things he will touch upon, right? So I think we can always say that there is no way you can have a balance in your company. You don't have a balance with yourself and a balance with your founders. And the idea that this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So you need to you need to take care of yourself, and you have only one life. And sometimes, if you need to be very careful. And I said to people also about, bankrupt and divorce together is a recipe for disaster, right? Apart from a very expensive part. So how do you bring your partners into the journey? How do you have conversations about it? Because it's going to be tough no matter what. And I think this is a fundamental part of that's part of the experience we can bring to the people, right? And not to underestimate this part of the journey that is, I think, very, very important, and probably helps you being grounded, right? And being thankful on it, right?
Yeah. What is your next book that you're gonna write? So you have done two. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a long overdue book about cooking. I love cooking. I have cooked up to 80 people. It's one of the most fun memories of my period as a wise guys is always cooking in all the batches for all the batch and bring them together. And the last 2 years when we're doing them in Bilbao, we do these chocos or we rent a place to cook. I think, it's about how food, how cooking, how this brings you together as human beings. And I think this is something that we learn in the southern cultures in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, from our grandparents. I can just see my grandmother cooking. It's an image that I will have for life and will always make me smile. And I think it's about how do we bring this together, right? And I think I love to have the time and the space to write this book, right? So I think That one I want to do. And then it needs to be the right time. But, I wrote the book about performing times of crisis, the second book, and I think it was very nice. But I think at some point I want to bring my own journey in some of the types of difficulty a bit more on the deeper side, and also share that with people, right? Because, there is this 1-2 months of total anxiety, of your stomach hurting, and you're not feeling like doing anything. And I think sharing that part of the, and it can happen because you have a breakup with your partner or a difficult time in the relationship, or it can happen because of professional side. But don't think how you feel differs a lot, right? And I think it's about how to be kind to ourselves, how to be able to talk about it, to express it, to cry, to walk, because it's just not going to go faster away, and sometimes it's long processes, right? So being able to write about this on a very human, very relatable way, I think is something that I would love to document and to share at some point. I don't know if that would be a book or would be how to do it. Yeah, and I long standing love to do a podcast with my partner, just to invite people and have nice chats with them. I think we are very, very fun social individuals, even if we think very differently. And I think we love to at some point share the air, but that's for fun. If it becomes something nicer than that, amazing. And kind of say, hey, once a week, you put an hour and a half, you do some studies, you do some research. I think it's always fun. You do it all the time. Talking to interesting people is always interesting, right? And listening.
Cool. Thanks for joining the podcast and sharing your insights. I'd love to meet with you offline soon. Join our events and our Global Investor Summit Lisbon on November 11th.
I need to cook for you also.
We have a retreat as well, so we can cook in the retreat. So it's not only formal. We are also launching a clubhouse, so we'll have a house where you can come and cook together with our members.
Yeah. Lisbon? Are you doing that in Lisbon, Yuri, or?
In Cascais area, we're currently looking for a property to launch the clubhouse. So to bring the community together.
Put me on as soon as that is ready, happy to go and test the kitchen of the club. And I will, we gave my apron, happy to do it. I love Lisbon. I actually work in Lisbon 2 or 3 times in life. And I always say that if I will spend a period of time that is not Malaga now, Lisbon is one of the few places that it gets me excited to spend some time there. So
no, it's definitely an amazing place, and see you soon, and good luck with your new funds, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. And keep the amazing work in the VNTR network. I think what you're doing is also it's not an easy challenge, but I think what you're trying to put together and your vision is amazing. So I think it's something that can be very helpful for Europe and for the world. But I focus on Europe, and yep, looking forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.